is Levi, and just give me 1 second. This is a lot harder than I thought it was. So I'm going to talk about my experience with making a multilingual Sámi website, and the website is garmeres.com. So what is Garmeres? So I got a question if this was about Gameres. It's not Gameres, so sorry if you thought it was Gameres. No, Garmeres is an organization for queer Sámi people. And our main focus of work is the intersectionality between Sámi culture and queer identity. So the name Garmeres, it's a southern Sámi word and it means pride. And one of our goals is to arrange a yearly pride festival across borders for Sámi people. So yeah, last year's festival was actually held in northern Finland in a place called Ohtsioka. However, we are currently only based in Norway. We have one branch, and we just call it the Norwegian section, even if we don't have any other sections, because we plan to expand in the future to hopefully, or at least Finland and Sweden, but hopefully maybe Russia. But you know, that's kind of optimistic because it's Russia. We are a very small organization. We're completely run by volunteers. I'm on the board myself. I joined earlier this year in February. And when I joined, Garmeres did not have a website, which is kind of necessary if you want to have people join your organization. You want to have the information easily available. So since I'm really bad at organizational work, I figured I can contribute with a website instead. So I offered to make one. So a little background information if you're not familiar with the Sámi. We're the indigenous people of the area we refer to as Sápmi. And that consists of the northern parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula of Russia. There's about 11 different Sámi languages, but the ones that are most common are Northern, Southern, and Lule Sámi. And there's a varying degree of difference between these languages. I personally speak Northern Sámi, and while I'm able to hold a conversation with a person speaking Lule Sámi, I won't necessarily understand someone who's speaking Southern Sámi. So not all Sámi people understand all the different Sámi languages. And also a lot of Sámi people don't even speak a single Sámi language. The Sámi languages are pretty endangered. Some of them are actually critically endangered. And the reason I bring this up is because generally in the queer community, we try to be inclusive of everyone as far as we are able to. And making a queer Sámi website, I thought it was important to accommodate everyone, regardless of language. So we want the content to be available in different Sámi languages, but we also want it to be available in English, because in case someone doesn't understand Sámi or aren't able to read or write it. And yeah, to actually making the website, I'm going to show you a little bit what it looks like so that you have a frame of reference when I go on in the presentation. So can you see this? No, you can't. Can I do this? There we go. So I'm gonna have to try and do this without looking at it myself. So we have this basic landing page. You can choose your language. Currently we have English, Norwegian, and Northern Sámi. We want to add more Sámi languages in the future, but currently we're only like a couple of people who speak Sámi in the board. And those of us who do only speak Northern Sámi. So we don't have anyone yet to produce the other Sámi language content. So yeah, it's pretty simple. There are some blog posts, pictures of the board, information about becoming a member, and contact information. But I think the most important functionality here is the ability to just kind of change the language of each page. You know, if you go into a blog post and you don't understand what it says, you should be able to just click on your language and you get the same thing in your language. So let's see, back to the presentation. So I'm just going to name drop a few of the technologies that I used. The website is a Jamstack website, which basically just means that the content and the code is decoupled, and the pages are pre-rendered before they are served. So the build pipeline is basically just, I use a platform called Vercel that has automation of build pipelines. And when content is changed in a content management system, it triggers a webhook in Vercel, which triggers a build with Gatsby. And what Gatsby does is that it just fetches content from the content management system, pre-renders a bunch of React pages, and kind of gives them to Vercel, and Vercel distribute them through their content distribution network. So the best thing about this is that it makes it very fast because the pages are served from the edge, and they're already pre-rendered. So when a person visits the page, the time from you enter the URL till the page is loaded, it's very fast compared to like single page web apps. So for the content management system, I used a headless CMS, which is a type of CMS where the content is completely decoupled from the code. So you can edit the content and it doesn't affect the code, and vice versa. And finding a headless CMS that fulfills the requirements of this website was very difficult because I had to try a lot of things and do a lot of research. And since we want to have a website in multiple Sámi languages, and we wanted to have the opportunity to add more Sámi languages later, it kind of gave us this list of requirements. First of all, we need multilingual content. That's an easy one. But we also need support for adding custom languages. And this is because most, or actually all of the content management systems that I tried out, they did not have Sámi languages in their predefined built-in list. So I needed to be able to add more languages that was already in the predefined list. Also needed to be able to add, for example, Southern Sámi later down the road without having to translate every single page that was already there. Which brings me to the next requirement. We needed a default fallback language. So if we have, say, a blog post and it doesn't have a Southern Sámi translation, it should just fall back to English. And it needs to be cheap because we have no funding. So I found one, and that's Storyblock. And I'm going to show you real quick. Let's see. How do I do this? I'm not very good with Mac. So let's see. So the nice thing about Storyblock is that you're able to kind of see your page as you are editing the content, even if the page is completely decoupled from the content. Because I can give it a URL to where the page is hosted, and in the editor, it kind of fetches an editor version of that page. And it lets me edit text real time. I can write hello here and you'll see that immediately. And you can also just kind of drag and drop your components, which I think is neat. But the main reason it shows story block is because, let's see, settings. It's because of this here. You can just add a new language whenever, and they even had a Sámi language predefined, but it was a little weird because you have this Lappish in parentheses, which is, I would say, kind of a politically incorrect word to use. And you have the SC language code, which is the language code for some African country. I don't really remember which. So I thought it was a little strange, but that doesn't really matter because I can, I can add it if I want to, and I can remove the Lappish, and I can write Southern Sámi if I want to. And I can just add this to the actual Southern Sámi language code if I want to. And if I would click save now, it would generate the whole page again. And every single page that is already there would have a Southern Sámi version, although the Southern Sámi version would actually just link back to the English one because the translation doesn't exist, which is the main reason why Storyblock was great for this use case. I'm just going to delete this. So let's see here. So what I did was I made some content. I created a Gatsby page with React, and I ran a Lighthouse test on it, and I got this. Lighthouse complained that I didn't have an HTML tag with the lang attribute. So basically, it was asking for a tag like this, just an HTML tag that says what's the language of the contents of this page. And I usually don't overthink things. I just do the Lighthouse test and do whatever it tells me to do. So I did. But yeah, I was going to say why this is important. I kind of forgot. So the reason why we need this language tag is because of search engine optimization. So I'm just going to recap it briefly for those who aren't familiar. It's just search engine's way of ranking your page according to how well it matches a search keyword. So this kind of gives your page a score. So when you search something, the pages with the highest score ends up on the top. So if I were to search, let's see. If I search here for Garmeres, my page is going to come second, garmeres.com. And that's because Facebook, they're better at SEO than I am. They have more resources, so they do a lot more work here, so they end up on top. But I still did some things, the basic things. So I ended up with some visibility. And that's the main point of doing it, visibility and traffic to your page. So we also have something called the duplicate content problem. So when you have a website that has multiple translations and you don't specify the language of each translation and link them together, then a single page with 3 different versions are going to sabotage its own SEO score. So you can have, say, the homepage, but it exists in English, Norwegian, and Northern Sámi. And if you don't tell the search engine that these are just translations of the same page, then they're going to sabotage each other, and because they're competing about coming to the top of the search results. So we want to avoid that. And we do that by first adding the HTML lang tag, but we also add an alternate link that just tells the search engine what are the links to the different translations and what are the languages of the different translations. So I Googled Sámi language codes because I wanted to find out how do I tell Google that this is a Sámi page. And I just found this list on Wikipedia, and I see Northern language, Northern Sámi is SME. So I just kind of added that. And I made this simple component that just adds these tags in whatever language is specified for each page. And Lighthouse is still not happy. It's still giving me an error, even though I have the lang codes and I did everything by the book. So Now I'm starting to get worried because the only thing that's different between because it's only complaining about the Sámi pages, I found out. It didn't complain on the Norwegian or the English versions. So I start to worry that maybe the language code is the problem. Maybe HTML doesn't support Sámi language codes. And if that's the case, then that would be a huge problem because I wouldn't be able to do SEO correctly. So I have my debugging process, and it's kind of a weird process, but I'm going to talk you through it. So I see that the Northern Sámi language code, the SME code that I used, is part of the ISO 639.3 language standard. And I do like a quick Google, what is this? What are these numbers? And basically it's just a collection of language codes. And we have something called the ISO 639.123, and probably more, but I'm only familiar with the first three. And the higher the number, the last number here, the more comprehensive it is. So ISO 639.3 is more comprehensive than 2, because number 2 had the language code for all of the Sámi languages, like the language family itself. That's the SMI code, while every variation was in the ISO 639.3. So I'm starting to think that the 639.3 isn't valid for HTML. So I tried to replace SME with SMI because I'm thinking maybe the 639.2 works. You know, I just have to try another format. And I rebuild the page and it works. So now I have one Sámi language code that works, but that doesn't really solve the problem long term because we still have the duplicate content problem if I were to add another Sámi language later. So I kind of just figure that this is a problem for future me, because right now we only have a Northern Sámi translation. I want to add the Sámi, Southern Sámi translation later, but that's later down the road. And I can't really get that to work right now. So I don't really have time. So I just kind of drop everything and figure this is fine. So I figured I'd call it a day, but then I inspect the page because I like to do that, to just see what the HTML looked like. Is there anything weird? And I see something very weird. I marked it with red. So apparently I wrote SMJ instead of SMI. This was completely an accident. I just had a typo. And I ran that through Lighthouse, and that worked. And if you see on this list, the SMJ, that's Lule Sámi, and it's part of the ISO 639.3. So now I'm just really confused, because apparently it accepted that one, but not the other one that I used, that was from the same language standard. So I just test all of these, and apparently all of them work except for Northern Sámi for some reason that I couldn't understand for the life of me. So I'm going to save you all the process I did. I just did a lot of Googling and did a lot of research and tried to find out why doesn't Northern Sámi work while all the other ones work. And I found a little facts about HTML line codes. They use multiple standards, and they use a lot of more of the ISO 639 standards, at least 1, 2, and 3. And they have this rule that the least specific takes precedence over the more specific. So ISO 639.1 codes takes precedence over those from 2, which again takes precedence over those from 3. And all of this is defined in something called the IANA language subtag registry, which I am going to show you. It's this, if you Google it, you find it immediately, but you kind of have to know what to look for in order to find it. And it's this very unintuitive text file that just has a lot of, it has language codes and languages. And this is all of the language codes you can use in HTML. So if we search for Sámi, it's going to give us Northern Sámi as the first one, and that's SE, not SME. And this language code is actually defined in the ISO 639-1. So yeah, you find the other ones here too, and they are all defined in the ISO 639-3. So there are, like, the Northern Sámi one uses a whole different standard than the other Sámi languages. So yeah, it's just a summary in case anyone ever needs to make a page and mark it as Sámi content, use these codes. So I added all of this. I used the right Northern Sámi language code, and I linked to the translations and run Lighthouse, and Lighthouse is happy and I'm happy. So here's just a summary of the stuff I learned. If you're going to work with language codes in HTML, just look up the IANA language subtag registry. I'm going to save you the Google search and just look up there immediately. It's going to save you a lot of the trouble I went through. Northern Sámi is in the ISO 639-1 standard, while the other Sámi languages are in the ISO 639-3. And this is because 90% of Sámi language speakers speak Northern Sámi. So it was significant enough to make it in the first ISO 639 standard, while the others weren't. So they were added at a later time, and that's why they ended up in another standard. So that's why the SE code takes precedence over the SME one. And that is the end of my talk.